And we'll record all the way through, and then it just means that we can get out to everybody. So I think we have, many people have we got on now, Beatrice?
We've got 23.
23. So we still have about, I think there's about 45 to 50 people who are involved in the 21-day challenge, which is great. And then even some of you guys who are here now are at different points on the curve. So it's, the talk today is kind of general stuff around what I want to talk to you about meditation and mindfulness, and just to enhance your journey. But if you then have specific Q&As, whether it's related to your own experience or maybe specifics to certain types of meditations that we've undertaken through this, whatever questions you have, just completely feel free. So thanks everybody for coming. And I think just that breath exercise is an interesting point, so for me to come on and to speak, I use the breath before I come on to kind of connect in and slow down, because you come on to a meeting, you're preparing your notes, you think what you're going to say. And for those of you who've had the fortune or misfortune, depending on your perspective, of public speaking, a lot of the times you hear this guidance, and people say to you, make sure you take in some nice deep breaths, breathe out slowly before you actually have to stand up and address an audience. But in addition to that, it's really worthwhile having the whole idea of grounding yourself as well. So actually, just noticing your feet. I know many people have commented over the course of our interactions on the daily meditations that, there's a real understanding and connection to the body and an awareness of the body now. And when you're about to publicly speak, we often get caught up in the head, what will people think of me? Is this going to work out? Oh my God, do I remember what I'm going to say? All that kind of stuff. So the breath taps into our nervous system, but it's also handy then just to notice the body. And it can either be, I notice my feet, I wiggle my toes, or it can be, I notice my hands, I notice my fingers. Simple little things just to get us out of our own heads, because that's where we tend to get caught way too often. So I just want to go through a couple of themes from our meditations. And one of the things that you will have heard me say is this idea of the beginner's mind. And the beginner's mind is something that we bring to meditation for a couple of reasons. Principally, one of the things that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get you to the point where when you arrive in your meditation, and when there is like guidance as there is today and over the last couple of weeks, I want you to reacquaint yourself each time with a different part of the body. Because if I'm meditating on Wednesday and I'm meditating on Sunday, it's quite likely that they're a very different experience, because Sunday will have hopefully been, I'll be arriving there on the back of a Saturday, on the back of a weekend. So I may be in a different state of mind when I step into my meditation. And on Wednesday, I might be bringing in some of the challenges from Tuesday. So we want the beginner's mind, because we want to notice, like when I arrive and I pay attention to, my forehead or my eyes or my eyebrows or my jaw. And again, the jaw is a point where many people have started to just notice, wow, I didn't actually know how my jaw feels. The tightness that we have around our jaw is often a very good indication of the stress within the body. So we want this beginner's mind, because we want to kind of arrive at each body part and go, what's here today? how does it feel? What do I notice when I rest my attention here on this part of the body? And the resting of your attention on the particular part of the body allows you to just sit with it and notice it. And really what we're noticing is two things. We notice pleasant. So times we'll arrive at a body part and we'll go, okay, that's interesting. I feel quite good today. You know, there's no tension in my shoulders. My back feels good. Okay, I noticed that. But we also notice the unpleasant. Okay, I feel some tightness. I feel some tension there. And if we don't have the beginner's mind, we tend not to notice that because we'll kind of go, oh yeah, oh now it's my shoulders, now it's my back, now it's my lower back. So we want each moment and each experience to be as if it's brand new, as if it's the first time you arrive there. So the beginner's mind is one of the most important things that we use within mindfulness as a practice. And when you broaden out what we're trying to do, so if you think about sitting with an uncomfortable feeling in the body, so sitting with tightness in the jaw. So I often notice when I'm stressed, I feel tightness in my jaw. I'll feel tightness in my shoulders. And I don't notice the physical signs of stress unless I actually slow down and pay some attention. And then when I slow down and pay attention, I may not even notice that I am actually mentally stressed. But when I then notice my body, I go, okay, maybe there's a little bit more going on here than I actually think. And then when we rest the awareness into that point, which many times you'll have heard me say in the guidance, you know, if it feels comfortable, you know, move to that point of tightness, move to that point of tension and rest within it. And what we're trying to do then is we're trying to move towards difficulty. And this is kind of counterintuitive to the way that we're wired from a Western standpoint, where we kind of move away from difficulty at any given time. You know, it's like, there's a problem going on. There's an issue. I don't really want to deal with that. I'll watch Netflix instead. I'll have a glass of wine. I'll do whatever I need to do not to deal with the issue that's there. So what we're trying to do from a mindfulness perspective is we're saying, okay, let's start the work around the physical side of the body. So the physicality of the body. I notice there's some tightness. I notice some tension. I'm going to rest my attention inside it. And then when we're inside it, we stay there for a few minutes. And, you know, that might feel a long time or a short time, depending on how you feel within the particular guidance. But what we're then looking to do is to notice that whether through instruction, so like the times I will say, you know, breathing out and letting go, or the idea of the ice to water approach, whether we actually use an instruction or we just rest inside the tension. When we rest inside it, we're just watching and waiting to see what happens. And generally you'll find, and if this hasn't happened yet, don't worry about it, you know, give it time. But we start to notice that if we just sit in the tension point, so if it's the tight jaw, the sore shoulder, the tension point on the body, wherever it is, if you actually just rest your attention in there, and then you just stay there and just continue to notice it and continue to notice it, even without my instruction of saying, you know, breathe in the life and the energy and breathe out, letting go, the melting away, you can actually start to influence that point of tension. So where we bring our attention, we start to also bring energy to that point. And so what tends to happen is we notice that, okay, I'm on a part of my body, it feels a little bit uncomfortable. Actually, there's a part of it that feels really uncomfortable. I'm going to move towards that part of my body. And when I move towards that part of my body, I'm going to now rest my attention inside it. And as I stay with it, it starts to open up. It's the pain or the tension is not as bad as it was. And then it starts to release and it's passing. What we're really teaching ourselves within this practice, the beginner's mind, to bring our attention to these points of the body is, 1, notice where the tension is in the body. 2, noticing that anything that is discomfort will pass. But 3, and most importantly, we're building up this resilient capacity to also realize that this applies to much more than just the body. So it also applies to other things in our lives. So it's to build a capacity to also be able to notice, as your meditation evolves, that there are other things in your life that may not be physical that appear whilst you're inside your meditation. And I know some of you have had those experiences, and have raised points on the comments page, and also some of you exchanged it with me on emails. So it's discomfort is going to arrive, and what do I do with it? And you may, and this is a question that I'll put back to you guys as well when we open up. You can often notice that these bigger kind of questions in your life appear during silent meditations. So whilst I'm guiding you, you're kind of moving from point to point to point, and I'll leave you at certain times to rest. But then every few days we move into a silent meditation. And when you do that, you start to notice other things appearing. So of course, the mind wanders. And, for those of you who are still unsure, it always will. And it'll never really stop. So even experienced Zen Buddhist teachers will tell you that the mind wanders. And they just hope that in the next life it stops. But, for people who told me who they've, been in meditation practice since a very young age in some monasteries where I've spent time, they have wandering minds. So don't set yourself a goal of thinking that you're going to have a quiet mind. But what we're trying to cultivate is the awareness of the wandering mind. So to finish off on this point and to bring it back to where I started, if you think about the tension or the tightness in the body, you bring your attention to that point and you rest within it. And then you're resting there and the mind wanders, you bring it back, you stay in the point of attention, you keep your breath going, and you start to notice that it just becomes a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, and then we move on to another point. When you're in meditation and you're in silence and you're just focusing on the breath, of course the mind wanders an awful lot. And my practice is always just on the breath, and my mind wanders a lot. But what tends to happen is that because we create a little bit more clarity and we slow down a little bit more, when the mind wanders, it often wanders to a specific point of relevance that might be important. So the discomfort that might appear is a particular issue that might be in your life right now that actually has created the tension in the jaw, or the tightness in the shoulder, or the discomfort in the tummy. And we start to sit with that idea. So it's like, okay, I notice that I feel worried, I feel uncomfortable about, coronavirus and how this is impacting the world right now and what's going on. So you then get caught into that idea. So now the mind goes, oh yeah, wow, let's go over there. Let's really start to wander, or let's really start to worry about that point. And then you notice it and you say, I noticed that. I'll bring my attention back to my breath. And as you breathe through it, you then go off and notice that point again. And it'll be the same topic. And then you bring yourself back. But after a few times, it just starts to dissipate a little. And if you were on the call with us last week, one of the things that I said that we practice most in mindfulness and within Buddhist psychology is then being able to discern when we start to slow down and notice what arrives for us. A very simple question. Can I influence or change this point? So this recurring theme that's appearing, do I have any influence and control over it? And if I don't have influence and control, then I'm starting to just notice that one of the things that's creating stress in my life is something that I have no personal sovereignty over. So I can't influence and control this topic. So as I sit within my meditation and I breathe and I notice it, I'm also able to notice, okay, the broader picture of how the country is dealing with the virus or how the government is dealing with it or how locally it's being dealt with, I can't influence and control it. And as you continue to practice your meditations, you start to get to an understanding that, okay, yeah, this one arrives. I can't do anything about that. And then if you sit with your meditation, suddenly one or two things might arrive. And then they are actually something that you have some element of discernment or some element of capacity to do something about. So often the practice is concluded by you coming out thinking, there's something that I can take from today's meditation. This is a topic that clearly my conscious awareness is drawing my attention to, and maybe now I need to spend some time thinking about it. So what can be helpful is even having a piece of paper at hand whilst you're meditating, and when you come out, you can write a couple of things down, and it means then that you have something to actually review and consider afterwards. So it's the beginner's mind is really a capacity to notice, what's here when I sit here inside this body and I'm aware during this practice, and I notice that there's physical pain, there's tension. Okay, I notice that when I sit with it, it passes. And then two, we're starting to notice that there are challenges and difficulties in our lives. And two, when I sit through these, they start to pass. So it's just cultivating that capacity to be able to understand a little bit better what's going on with our practice and why in many ways are we doing a lot of what we do. As you move into week 3, if you're on day 14 going into day 15, we'll get to some more meditations where there are larger spaces for you to just sit and start to notice what's coming up for you. So we're just kind of developing that. And really, as you probably heard me say at the start of the meditations, we're also cultivating this idea of personal leadership, because I suppose one of the great tragedies of adulthood is that we suddenly realize nobody's coming to save me. We never read that part of the script, which we always thought, at some point, somebody's going to come along and tell me that, there's a better way of doing this. The reality is we start to realize that the true leader within our own lives is firstly ourselves. So we're using meditation to cultivate the resilience to be able to find the capacity within ourselves to do the things that we need to do to help our own lives. So again, the idea of sitting with the discomfort, then sitting with the difficult things that arrive, they then are the key issues that we often have to tackle. So they will bring up unpleasant conversations that might need to be had, unpleasant interactions that might need to be had. But at times, growth is found within discomfort. So a part of our practice is to kind of notice what's going on, take some stock, and maybe make the changes. The last thing I'll say on that, and then I'm going to go to questions, is that the idea of practice is so important for so many reasons. So covering off what I just said, that's so important and critical. Being our own leader is also the capacity to have the dedication to have the practice consistently every day. So I work with one-to-one clients, and most people who work with me, I see them for 10 sessions and I don't see them for a year. If I do get a contact from them sooner, the first question I always say to them is, so when did you stop meditating? And they go, oh yeah, shit. That was like 2.5 months ago. Okay. So you remember what I said to you at the end? Don't stop meditating. So it's the consistency of practice is so key, because when we start to cultivate this resilient spirit, this capacity to navigate life, remember what I gave you, the whole idea last week is, this is life as it is, and this is life I want to be. So if we spend our whole life going, I really want life to be like this, we're always, with a creak in the neck, leaning into something that isn't really ever going to work out. When I start to build a resilient capacity to deal with life as it is, it's coming at me and I move through it and I'm okay. So the personal leadership is important. The practice brings that consistency in the context of a key behavior. And then we look to build the pillars of wellness around that. So meditation is the starting point where all of a sudden you go, wow, God, I can actually create a discipline where, I brush my teeth in the morning, I sit down and I have my meditation practice. And of course, as many of you have already noticed, the difference when you meditate in the morning versus the evening is quite interesting, especially when you notice the difference between meditating, either in the morning time before you've eaten, or even meditating in the afternoon before you've eaten. A full stomach changes that dynamic. So you've got that capacity to already find a little bit of discomfort, create a practice, and consistently show up. And then the pillars that you build on top of that are the whole ideas of what else do we have in our lives that doesn't necessarily serve me to be healthy, and especially from a mental health perspective. The other key things are sleep. And honestly, for me, if I stop meditating, I don't feel great after a few days, right? But if I sleep badly for 2 days, I don't feel good. So anxiety will rise significantly when we don't allow ourselves to have the sleep that we need. So just like the way that you cultivate your meditation practice, your sleep is also, a consistent practice and structure. So it's a habit that we need to form. And I know it's not a habit that, you can form easily, because of course we all have social lives, and we had social lives, maybe not so much. We have Zoom calls. But we don't have the capacity to always be in bed at the same time. But when you have general structure around when you wake up in the morning, you should then work backwards to know when is it that you need to go to bed. So for me, I wake up at like 4:45 most mornings. So at 9:30, I'm going to bed. Beatrice and Luca have a good old laugh at me as I head off to bed, but I know that I'm going to wake up at 4:45 if I go to bed at 11 o'clock, because I'm just used to it. My body clock just goes 4:45 and I'm awake. And I know that if I wake up at 4:45 and I've been up to 11 o'clock, I'm going to feel a little bit dull in my head, and I know I'm just not going to be to the same level of connectiveness to myself and my day as I would like to be. So sleep, as you develop your meditation practice, sleep is the next thing to have a really good look at, and just to work through, what does that look like, and where is it at? And I can send out to the group a couple of things on sleep, which are really good, interesting articles, but a lot of structure around, get your phone out of your bedroom for a start, because if you're drawn to that, that's a complete disaster. But having the right lighting in the room, having the right setting in the bedroom, and then how you set yourself up before you go to sleep. So don't just kind of, leave the horror movie on the TV and then go straight to bed and expect to go to sleep. So what are the structures in between? So I won't go into that now, but I'll send you guys some stuff on that. So sleep, diet, alcohol, caffeine, all the other things that play into our mental health, which we don't really understand, and exercise and socializing. So there's a whole raft of things that we need to bring into our consideration, but the practice that you're starting within your meditation gives you the capacity to realize that, you know what, if I'm the 1% of society that actually meditate, and I've mastered the thing that most people think is nearly impossible, I'm going to have a pretty good chance of getting hold of some of the other things in my life that maybe just need a little bit of attention. And I'm not advocating that, we all stop drinking and we pray 10 times a day, but it's just, if your mental health is an issue, and you've now tackled meditation, just remember that, we go through life with this body almost in autopilot sitting in the back of our heads. So before you were meditating, you didn't even notice probably that you had a body at times that had some kind of tightness and tension. So now you're connected to the body and you're meditating. So it's like now you've realized that, okay, I need to now make sure that, this vehicle that I'm traveling in has the right fuel on board, but it also needs to be serviced. It needs water. It needs TLC. So there's a whole bunch of other things that you can put on top of it. So if I think about, why is my life anxiety free? It's not anxiety free. It's just, I don't get anxious when the difficulty arrives. So it arrives and I go, that looks really unpleasant. I don't like that. But then I'm able to go, I can't really influence or change that. So I'm not going to get caught into it. Or arrives and I go, I can do something about this. So I'll take action. I won't try and put it off. So we're just learning to have that fluidity of noticing what it is, deciding if I can do something with it, then I'll take action, or it's not for me to worry about, so I swipe it away. And in the same way, then we build into the next foundations around our own health and well-being. So I've got some more points, but whether we get to them or not, I can share stuff afterwards anyway on an email. But I suppose good to open up and see if anybody wants to bring anything up themselves, or if people have put questions in already. Beatrice?
Not yet, but sorry, I had muted everybody. So if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself.
Just drink some tea. Anybody can decide if they want to talk.
I was on last week. I'm on to day 9 of this program. So I've had my own issues, whatever, and I'm still working through pretty heavy depression at the moment, which is influencing my day and week. But I have to say the program is great. I'm a bit higgledy-piggledy with it at the moment. I'm just kind of picking a random time when I'm not as busy, whatever, and I really should, I think, when I wake up in the morning, go and do the mindfulness first before I do anything, because I'm kind of delaying it because there's stuff going on, whatever, we have a lot of worries about our job's future here. But I think doing it first thing in the morning is probably something that I just need to focus on. I said that the first 8, 9 I've done now so far have been great, and I never thought I would actually slip into doing some mindfulness courses, but in the present circumstances, I feel I need them. And but thanks very much for what you've done for me so far, and hopefully I can ease my way out of this.
That's great. No, thanks for sharing that, JK. I mean, I think the if I go back to my own experiences with anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress, I spent for me it was quite acute. So I can remember it was 2014, I think, or 2013, and between, I think, December of at the end of that year and March, I tried to manage it all in my head. And I kept thinking, oh, I'll get through this and I'll manage it. And the more I tried to manage it, the more difficult it was for me to deal with everybody else and all of their stuff. So the challenge with depression in how it impacts our moods is that we have to become quite isolated, because we don't have the same energy that we once had. So to try and achieve what we need to do, we become very, very targeted and focused on what we're doing. And I held back, and I don't think I spoke to Beatrice about it at all for maybe 3 months, but she was really starting to notice that, things weren't exactly as they should be. And one day she noticed that I'd stopped petting our dogs, and she said to me, I don't really know what's going on with you, but you've stopped petting our dogs. So we tend to kind of conserve whatever energy we have to just do what we need to do. And that's the real challenge, AK, because the body's tired, the mind is tired. The excessive thinking has such a huge drain on us. And it was only when I found my teacher, and he said to me, we started working together, and the first thing that he said to me was, if you do everything that I tell you to do, your life will start to change, but you need to first bring that sense of discipline. And for me at that point, and like at the point I was with him, I'd already had a major panic attack in a meeting. And to put my life into context at that stage, that was a panic attack where I didn't know if it was a heart attack or a stroke, but I had a really important meeting that I needed to close, and I was in my boardroom, and I had a whole bunch of people there, and I ignored the panic attack and worked through it. And when I finished the meeting, I went back to my hotel and just had a couple of glasses of whiskey and thought, I don't know what that was, but hopefully it won't come back again. But the body is constantly going tap, 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 pay attention. I'm physically tired. I don't have enough capacity to focus on all the things, so that we eventually slow down, take some time and pay attention. And the one thing, if you can, JK, is to bring that structure of routine into your practice in the morning, because if you do it as soon as you wake up, you're kind of conditioning the body to go, okay, we're ready to go into the day ahead. And right now, in this moment, when I sit here with my eyes closed and I focus on my breath, if for the next 23 hours and 30 minutes, we feel that life is outside of our control, in these 30 minutes, we're going to reclaim a little bit of personal sovereignty. And it's that capacity that just creates that little bit of stillness and slows down, that just helps to nurture that idea throughout your day. So if you can bring it in there, it will really make a big difference. But I know it's not easy at all. But if you can, I think that could be really helpful.
I do need to do it in the morning. I say I did it this afternoon. I did it the evening before. So I think you're right. It's just in my present state, I do need to get into a routine. As somebody keeps telling me all the time, get your routine. So this should be probably part of my routine to start it first thing in the morning, whatever, So yeah, it's been, last couple of days have been tough. Last weekend was okay. This evening's not great, but get that structure, get that routine, and that's what I advise anybody in here to do as well, because if you don't get into a routine, things just get away from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Routine is key. The structure is key, and then remembering to get outside, because often we can feel stressed and anxious or depressed, and we're caught, and we're kind of, it's like that old thing when you're a kid, and you're taught, raise your head above the parapet and look out at the world around you. And we feel like we're tight and depressed. We're looking down, so we don't actually get outside. So even just getting out for that 20 minutes, that bit of walk, that connection into nature. Again, there's some incredible studies that have been carried out over the last 20 years showing the benefits of being in nature. So just being out where there are trees, where there are greenery, or, you know, being near the sea if you're lucky to be able to see it. There's one really interesting study where they showed they took three groups of people, all were working in office environments, and before they started the test, everybody was brought into one of these changing room environments where there are those horrible lights that, you know, none of us ever want to see ourselves naked in front of, right? So it's like the worst experience that you can stand there and look at your body. And they were asked to comment on how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their appearance, and then they were doing a psychological evaluation around a depression scale. And then they split them into three groups. And the first group at lunchtime every day was taken out to a local park, and they were asked to spend time during their lunch in the park, walking in trees and eating their sandwich sitting on the grass. And the second group was told to just continue on exactly as they are. So, you know, go to work, have your lunch, wherever you do it, don't change anything. And the third group was actually just given screensavers for their computer that were showing park scenes and sea scenes, so the seaside and the parks, and they were just asked to look at that for 15 minutes whilst they were sitting at a desk. And they ran the experiment, I think it was 6 months, came back and reviewed everybody. So you know, the cohort who didn't change anything, surprisingly enough, still felt the same way about their physical appearance, still felt the same way about their mental appearance, and there's been no change in their weight. And if I didn't say that at the start, they weighed everybody as well. The second group, who of course went outside and were in the park at lunchtime, when they were asked, they had a noted improvement in their mental well-being. So just by doing nothing else but consistently being out in nature every day at lunchtime. They'd also lost weight, so there was a physical change in their weight, and they felt much better about themselves in the context of, you know, appearance, etc. And that's kind of not necessarily so surprising. But the third group was really interesting. So the people who were just looking at pictures of nature and never actually going outside actually showed only a minor difference in the upturn of their mood and well-being to the people who'd been outside. So it was nearly identical. So they actually nearly had the same benefits as the people who were actually outside. So you don't get the vitamin D, which is great, but otherwise they spoke about the mood in the same way. But what was also staggering was they even lost weight. And this kind of posed a lot of questions for the team that were doing this particular clinical study. So they started to delve into a bit more detail with this cohort to find out, how did you lose weight? Because you were sitting at your desk and you weren't going outside. But they started to notice that just by those people sitting at their desk, when they asked them a little bit more about what that meant, they said, oh, you know, I really realized that I do like seeing blue skies and green trees and the seaside. So I noticed that when I got home, I was going for a walk more, or at the weekend, I was really making an effort to be outside and to hike. So I became more conscious about how I was connecting to nature. So the physiological changes had a part in the context that they actually went out and moved more. But when they look at the variance in depression and well-being, just looking at nice pictures of nature helps our well-being. So a lot of offices use this now. A lot of these kind of WeWork type scenarios, they'll have pictures of forests and everything in there because it just makes people feel happier. So it's important to have that connection to nature as well, wherever you can. So thanks, JK. Anybody else?
Justin, there was a question from Carl. Carl, would you like to say it yourself, or would you like me to read it?
Oh, I'm happy to say it, Beatrice. Yes, hi, Justin.
Hi, Carl.
no, I've been really, as we both have been, really enjoying the sessions now. We're right up to date and whatever. It's just when we do the body scans, there's just one particular thing. A note, I don't know whether you saw some of the comments that come through, whatever, but it's, you know, when you talk about going through from feet through to head, through to arms and so forth, everything really works. The only thing that doesn't work, and I hope this doesn't sound too bad for everybody on the call, is the heart. I cannot visualize or empathize when it comes to trying to understand the heart. As I said to you in the note, I'm sure I have one, but I'm not quite sure where it is. And it's very difficult. It's the only difficult thing I've found in the whole 14 days. So sorry, but that was really it. Just how to think about it, maybe.
Sure. Okay. It's just for the avoidance of doubt, it's kind of a roundabout here, yeah. I think one of the great challenges, and when we talk about the heart, so so mindfulness is an interesting translation from Sanskrit in the Buddhist texts, and there are people who believe that mindfulness is not the right translation and heartfulness is actually the right translation. So there are two different schools. The majority sit in the mindfulness camp, but heartfulness is considered to be, you know, one of the better translations. And in reality, when the Sanskrit translation comes in, there is an equivalence of words. So it's very hard for us from an English standpoint to truly get a sense of what we mean. So the fact that the heart is difficult means that, you know, you're doing it right. Because for so many of us, we don't actually really connect to our heart very often. And we're actually conditioned in many ways. And, you know, Carl and I were neighbors for many years. So I have a little bit of knowledge of Carl's work life and approach. And Carl is very much rigored and focused in the mind in the context of his career and his business life. So we kind of start to, if we live a life of saying, I need to work through logic, and logic is what's going to dictate my actions, what we're doing is we're actually removing ourselves from here, and we're really kind of sitting up here. And like, well, I was going to say within Eastern traditions and Buddhism, but even in the West now, this has really become more recognized. So within Buddhist traditions, we believe that there are two brains, and in many ways, the greater importance is placed on the brain here, you know, in the heart, because this is our emotional brain. This is the center where we find empathy and a capacity to understand people in a better way. But from a Western standpoint, we often leave that because we must stay inside the logical mind. And it's interesting that we've noticed now in Western medicine and also in some of the great studies around gut bacteria and the gut, we've noticed that there's a great capacity to think within the microbiome. So what's actually happening inside the body, that sense of instinct maybe has a lot more than we really think in the context of how it operates. So the heart is the instinct, the heart is the feeling, the heart is the connection to self. And if it's not there yet, then it's good. You know, first of all, you know, as you've heard me say many times, awareness is the first thing that we're trying to cultivate. So you now have an awareness of, that's interesting. You know, when I go to the heart, I don't really have that connection that I think I'm supposed to have. But then that's also the other great thing that we try to avoid, which is, you'll often hear me say, don't try and have an experience. Don't try and attach yourself to an outcome. Just kind of be with what's there. So it's, you know, I bring myself to my heart. So in my meditation, if I'm meditating and I've gone through the body scan, the reason why you'll notice that I don't start off any of these practices and say, okay, now just connect to the heart, because nobody can do that, right? It's really difficult to just go straight away, I connect to my heart. So we connect to the fingers, the toes, the body, we're slowing down, we're noticing things, and then we're going to the heart. But if you're struggling to find it and you want to cultivate it a bit, then try and sit separate to the meditation, but just with the eyes closed and the breath, and find the deepest sense of love that you can have for another person. So that could be the wonderful Chrissy sitting beside you, or your children, or your grandchildren, you know, and actually sit quietly on your own in a room, close your eyes, and think about the person or people that you love dearly, or maybe it's, you know, it's somebody who's passed, and actually think, when I really think about love and I think about a deep sense of connection to that other being, whether here or past, and I'm just noticing my body and I'm sitting here with my breath and I think about it, where do I feel it? You know, where do I feel it in my body? And I think in one or two of the meditations, I invite you to put your hand on your heart. And within the context of love, sit with the idea and the person and the feeling, and just think, as I reflect on this person, whether still in my life or past, and I sense real, meaningful, open, uncomplicated, honest love. Where is that now in my body? And you will start to notice that it's not here. It's within that type of practice that you go, okay, there's a gap here. This is something that I use for many other things. But when I think about how I love somebody, it's not here now. It will be there for you at times right now, and as you practice more, you start to open up the capacity to drop down into the heart. But I think if you try that as a separate practice, that might help it, Carl. But just give it time.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks. That's incredible, actually, my old friend. That seriously, that is genuinely quite incredible. I will do exactly that. Absolutely that. So
right.
Thank you.
Hi, SJ.
Hi, Justin. Hi, everyone. Justin, you were talking there about being aware of tension when you're doing the body scan. I often actually don't feel any tension, which is probably a good thing. But then it's quite tough to focus, and I find that my mind just then wanders. I do try to bring it back to the breath, but I don't know, I feel like struggle with it.
Sure. So again, look, you know, the tension may or may not be there. So it's you know, again, you hear me say at times, you know, that you may have tightness or tension, or you may have no sensation at all. So what we always want to try and do is just be with whatever's here. So if there's nothing here in the physical sense, then what's here? The busy mind. So that's what's being presented for you to do the work with. And for me personally, in my morning meditation, it's very rare that I have physical tension, but I still always have a busy mind, and sometimes, like, I'm trying to reflect back on this morning's meditation, which is always the one that I can try to remember best. So I had a call today that was going to be complicated, and I was sitting inside my meditation this morning, and I was getting drawn towards that particular point. So I was getting drawn into it. And even, you know, me every day for years meditating, I actually can be then gone and in there and you know, living in this kind of enveloped bubble of this particular issue, like as if I'm not even here in this body in that moment. I'm now off there with this particular topic. And I can remember this morning a bin truck arrived while I was off here thinking about this thing, and they put on that, you know, beep, beep, beep. And I kind of went, oh, what am I doing? I'm thinking about something that's happening at 10 o'clock. That's not what I'm supposed to do. And I'm going, okay, back to the breath. And I couldn't say to you, SJ, how long that was, but I'd say there was a pretty good chance that I could have been caught in that for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then I go, okay, back to the breath. And I said this to somebody actually on some of the comments on the website, which you know, I'm a bit behind. I think I'm about a day behind with some of you, so I will catch up. But you know, please do keep sharing. Your comments don't show up until I go in and release them. It just means that we don't end up with, you know, some idiot who's not part of our group posting stuff that's not very helpful. So I authorize the comments and then comment on. But somebody also said, you know, that they find that when they're meditating longer, it's at the end that they start to get a little bit more clarity on the breath and being able to pay attention. So that's always the way with me too. So I might actually start off a meditation and be actually really clear in my mind. So the first few minutes might be really clear. And I'll often think, wow, maybe I've just mastered this now. This just feels unbelievable. And then boom, I'm off and there's a thought and I'm gone off for a while and then I'm coming back. And then towards the end, you tend to have greater clarity. And the one thing I've noticed over time is that if I meditate for half an hour, or I meditate for 15 minutes, or I meditate for an hour, it's almost nearly the same percentages in the context of how good things are for me. So it's usually in the last 25% of my meditation, I feel like I'm more connected to the breath and I'm kind of getting a little bit more on top of the wandering mind. But that is the challenge. And we're cultivating an awareness of the fact that we notice the mind is wandering. And you hear me say that so many times. Like just noticing it is such a powerful thing. And even like I said today, I was daydreaming for 5 minutes about a problem that, you know, wasn't going to arrive till 10 o'clock. And I needed to really just try and be present to myself. So it's, you know, if you're on day 15 of the 21 days, you know, you might feel different at day 397. But it will just be a slow and steady improvement. You know, first of all, meditation is not a competitive sport. So we often think, well, am I getting better at this? You know, it's not, because I'm just learning to manage the struggles in my day and my life a little bit better than I was before I started to practice. So every day that we practice, if you remember, you know, the inflatable crash helmet, which we spoke about, and I'll mention that again before we get to the end, but it's a really helpful analogy to know that, you know, every day I put a little bit of air in my inflatable crash helmet. And I said to you, when people come back to me after they've worked with me on a one-to-one basis and they say, oh my God, I don't really feel so good. And, you know, things are not going well in my business and da-da-da. And I say, you know, when did you start meditating? Oh yeah, 2.5 months ago. So it's like, you deflate the crash helmet. So it's just that capacity to keep doing it, SJ, is important. And, you know, your discomfort is not the physical. You're now just getting used to noticing the mind.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's just whenever there was tension, I could really focus on that. And it felt like when there wasn't, it's like, it was just really hard to focus on no sensation. Like, so, yeah.
Yeah. And that's really, you know, if you're going into the third week, you know, there's a little bit more time of, you know, not listening to me. So actually just sitting with yourself and in silence. And that's really where you're cultivating that capacity to go, okay, so I'm not noticing my body. I'm not focusing on anything. I'm just sitting with what's here. So my personal practice is in silence every day. And it's just, you know, noticing the breath when the mind wanders. And then starting to notice what comes up. So the things that generally tend to appear are the kind of things that maybe I need to be spending some time and attention on. So it just helps cultivate the kind of places we should have our attention, as opposed to what we generally try to do and run away from them.
That's great. Thank you.
No problem. Got any more questions there, Beatrice? Or?
No, no other questions.
Hello, Justin. It's Paula here.
Hello, Paula. How are you? You're
Hi,
outside
how
in
are
nature. Look at that.
Yeah, it's very nice and warm. I just wanted to say that I try to do the meditation in the morning, but there are 2 days that I cannot really find the time to put the meditation in the morning. So I do it in the afternoon or in the evening. But what I found is what everybody's saying, that when you do it in the morning, it's such a difference how you face the day, as you feel very glad that you finished something. Like I read somewhere, it's like making the bed, for example, like it's something very small, but then you have the mind, like if you finish something that's very small, like making the bed, then you have more energy to face another things during the day. Of course, the meditation is not a small thing. I think it's a very huge thing. But I feel the same thing. Like you finish that in the morning, and then you have a different energy to face different things in the morning. So I will try to do every day in the morning instead of the afternoon or the evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, morning practice, if you can, makes such a massive difference. And I know myself, like if I don't meditate in the morning, which is like, maybe 5% of the time something comes up and I can't do it first thing in the morning, and I carry it into my day, two things are going to happen. One is I'm not going to meditate as long whenever I find that point throughout my day. So it's going to be a shorter practice than what I want. Yeah. Secondly, my interaction with meditation is going to be, built around food or, finding a slot. So I'm kind of like jamming it into a place. And when people work with me on a one-to-one basis, and I always say to them, okay, I want you to meditate first thing in the morning. I want you to get out of bed and brush your teeth. And they go, oh, I can't because I've got dogs or kids or, whatever. And I say, well, go to bed earlier and go to bed earlier at night and get up early in the morning. You need to kind of make the time. So it's hard, but what we're trying to do is actually set a time aside for ourselves, for us to be with ourselves. And it's so weird though, isn't it? Think about it, that we actually go, well, I don't really have time to set aside time for myself, to be with myself, for myself, because I need to be here for everybody else. Because we don't want to actually sit with the discomfort, because we know, if I have to actually sit with myself, I'll kind of have to face into whatever's going on in my head. So it's a hard discipline to put in place. But I love what you said about making the bed, because especially with kids, and we try this with our son, and I certainly wouldn't say we win it all the time, but we encourage him to make his bed every day. And simple small practices in the day are important. And also, if it's the place where you go back to sleep at night, when you've actually prepared it in the morning time, you're creating that ritual sense of, this is an important space for me to recharge and to reconnect. So by making my bed in the morning, I create that discipline and structure in my day. And then I come back and I'm greeted by something that I started in the morning time. If there's none of this, I would ever actually want to go back and change in myself when I was 21 or 23, but I would love to have gone back and taught myself to make my bed in the morning.
Yeah, even last year. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
So is there anything else anybody would like to bring up? Please feel free. Just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. No? Okay, so I will just finish off with the whole idea of just flow state is the last point, really, that I'll bring up. And flow state, some of you may or may not have ever heard about flow state, but professional sport, flow state is the big space that everybody wants to get to. So it's the capacity to be on the field of sport and just to operate from instinct. So operate from the center of what it is I know how to deal with and do without having to think, with the dreaded wandering mind. And if you think about the whole idea of the busy mind, when we bring ourselves to work, it's no different to a sports person. So if I end up working with a professional footballer who's not scoring goals anymore, it's highly unlikely that he's not scoring goals anymore because he is, not physically in the right capacity to score goals. It's more likely that the reason why he stopped scoring goals is because there is some mental issue, from an anxiety, from a stress, from a depression. There is an issue of the mind that then means there is a split-second difference in his reaction time. And if you are in professional sport and you go onto the field and you are playing at a highly competitive level, you can't think about your next move. You must be able to instinctively move to the next point. So if you're a striker and you're in playing soccer and you're up in the box and somebody plays the ball to you, you don't have the ball played to you, identify a good point in the corner of a goal that you're going to kick the ball to, and then work out the odds as to whether or not the keeper's going to get it. You just operate on instinct. But when people are anxious or stressed, when they're on the field of play, the big problem that's impacting their life is also in their mind. So they lose the capacity to have that nanosecond of movement, and the nanosecond becomes a second. And within that second, they lose the edge. So flow state is developing this capacity to be instinctively able to manage your work life, to manage your next steps. So for us in our normal jobs, because we're not all professional sports people, and certainly I am, but you have times when you can reflect back and you think, when I'm on it, I'm just like moving through it. I know how to make the decisions. I know what I need to do next. I'm clear, I'm focused, I'm determined. So what does that actually really look like? It actually really looks like I'm not stuck in here. Because when I get stuck in here, this is getting in the way. So it's when we get in our own way, we get caught in our head, we allow the mind to wander around and worry and question. And then this question comes, am I good enough? Will I get found out? What's going to happen next? This won't ever work out. Everything's going to go wrong. So we interrupt the flow. And the flow comes from the innate being, our capacity to be the best version of ourselves. So it's that idea of, which we'd love to be able to do. You show up at work and you leave all your personal problems in a little suitcase outside the door, and you come in and you start working, and then you go outside and you pick up your personal suitcase and you go home again. But within meditation practice and within mindfulness, the whole idea of everything that we cultivate is over time to bring us closer to that capacity of flow state. So at times when you're struggling with, why the effing hell am I doing this? And as SJ said, sometimes it's just like all I'm left with is just the wandering mind. It's over time and with practice, we start to just connect more into the flow and less getting caught in the mind. And that's really where our focus is. And then it's just, okay, I know instinctively what I need to do next. I know instinctively where my priorities are. And when you're feeling stressed and anxious, it's hard to find those decisions. But the consistency of practice just allows things to slow down. And what we're looking at in the context of the thoughts are, if it's like a speedway where all the cars are speeding around, and the cars are our thoughts, and they're bumper to bumper. So I have this thought, and then I have the next 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 thought. So people say, I'm thinking a million things at once and I can't think clearly. We know from detailed studies of the mind that we can only ever think of one thing at any one time. So what we're trying to do is, the speedway cars, we're trying to just slow down the mind so that we create space between the cars. So the next thought will arrive, and then the next thought will arrive, and then the next thought will arrive. But it's not bang, bang, bang. And within the space, we find the freedom. We find the capacity to connect to ourselves, to take a breath, to make the right decision. So I said last week about the whole idea of, you know, the space between the reaction, sorry, the stimulation and our reaction is where we find peace. So the stimulation is the event that arrives in our life. If we're constantly in the next thought, 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 and somebody then just deals you a problem, you then just go and react straight away. But we're building the flow state, the focus on the breath, slowing down. So the event arrives, the stimulation. I take a breath because I have my inflatable crash helmet on. And then I respond. And that space between you just slowing down and responding can have a hugely profound impact on you and the other person who's interacting with you. And that's fundamentally what we're building. So, unless anybody else has got any more questions.
I just ask one quick question.
Sure, of course.
Thanks a million. Thanks for all of this, Justin. It's been great. You just mentioned in one of the comments the other day that you might have an extra technique for dealing with anxiety. So just thought I'd suggest that.
Yes, brilliant. Thanks for reminding me, Louise. So I'm going to show you something, and this, I'll make sure that this is also on the recording, so you can get back to it. Okay. So within anxiety, stress, and tension, we hold so much of what's going on in the physical form, as you've all noticed in the context of your meditations. And one of the things that I teach when I'm working with people on a one-to-one basis is we kind of build up towards meditation. So it's different to the way that you guys have been going through it. But if you remember when you started on point 1, we do the box breathing. So we do some very basic breathing exercises to get the body conditioned. But if you're feeling anxious, stressed, this is a really helpful technique to use before you start meditating. But it's also a really helpful technique to have kind of in your locker that you can use whenever you want. Okay. So it's simply called the hand pressing technique. And everybody should be able to see me there. So you have your hands in a prayer-like position. Okay. This has got absolutely nothing to do with prayer, so don't panic. And where you have your thumbs kind of just pressed into the center of your chest, into the cavity area. So they're in the center of the body. And what we're kind of doing now is, if you can imagine, we're going to have like a wrestling match between the left-hand side of my body is going to be pushing that way, and the right-hand side of my body is going to be pushing that way. And the great thing about physics is that all that's going to happen is my hands will stay exactly where they are. Okay. And when you do this, place your hands here, close your eyes just like you would in a normal meditation practice. And you take a very deep breath in. Okay. So you really want to fill up the lungs and the belly. So you take a really deep breath in. And when you get to the top, as you push out really slowly, I want you to push your left hand against your right hand really hard, like it's a big battle, okay? So I'll show you as I battle myself. Breathe out really slowly. And when you've done it properly, you should feel like that. So it's almost like a couple of things happen. You notice that you create a lot of heat in your body. So there's a lot of tension coming through your hands. You will notice that your hands actually shake as you do it. So the good thing is, remember, this is your pressure on one side of your body against the other. So you're not going to hurt yourself, but you will think, well, this feels a bit weird. But what you're doing is you're taking the tension that exists in the body and you're bringing it to a central point here. And you're creating energy at this point, and it actually gets to just dissipate and leave. So it's like an exit point created within the hands that allows the tension to come out. And Louise, when you were asking me that question on the emails, the thing I would recommend is that try do it 3 times and then do your meditation. And you can, move it to a round of 3, do your meditation, then you can do another round of 3 at the end. So depending on how you feel. But it's one of the most powerful things that you can do to have a really quick, impactful sense of, how can I deal with my body? So I'll show you again. And anybody who wants to join in, please feel free. If you want to turn off your camera because you don't look as stupid as me, you can do that too. And then turn back on and see how you get on. But it's like this, prayer-like fashion, okay? The hands are kind of against the body, because if they're out here, then it's kind of moving all over the place. You're kind of keeping that kind of central place. Okay, and then when you fill up and you get to the top, what I want you to imagine is that, if you, when you hear people speaking Hebrew or Arabic, and it's that more kind of guttural sense, it's almost like you're kind of closing your windpipe. So if your exhale is like 100% open, you're kind of closing it so that as you're exhaling, it's like 20% air coming out. I'll do it really close to my mic so you can hear it. And it's, somebody once said to me, it sounds like you're possessed when you do this, but there's no black magic or possessions or anything else. It's just really using the breath as effective as we can. So hands at the chest, deep breath in. So I keep going until the very last drop of air is gone. I can tell you now, I do that and I just feel really nice. You've probably heard that expression before, get high in your own supply. This is one of the really nice ways to use your breath, where you kind of lift up how you feel emotionally inside, but you really empty some of the physical tension out of the body. There is an incredible doctor who writes an awful lot about the body, and I can never remember the names of the book, but his name is Gabor Morte, and Beatrice reminds me. I'll send that into the group. But his whole work around mind and body is really incredibly interesting, and he's an incredibly well respected doctor who's written multiple books, but in particular, he focuses on why do we die of heart attacks, cancer, strokes, all of these kind of things. because what we hold on to in the body, and we hold on so tightly, you know, it appears somewhere else. You know, it's like whack-a-mole, right? You know, if I'm holding on to all this tension, it's going to come out somewhere else. So here, I'm starting to let tension go out here. But if we move through life holding on to our tension, it appears somewhere else. You know, it pops up in the heart, in the kidneys, in the liver, cancer, all these guys. I mean, his work is quite extraordinary, and he's done some really interesting work around the whole clinical analysis of people who have come through cancer, and then looking back to their childhood and anxiety and stress in their lives, and then looking at the correlation of people who have physical ailments who've led difficult and challenging lives, and then measuring that against people who've come through relatively easy lives, and noticing the differential between the likelihood of a life-threatening disease and not. So it's a really interesting topic. One of his books is a kind of a really general overview, which I'll send into you if you want to read it. And there's an audio book as well. But
when the body says no.
That's it. Yeah. When the body says no. So literally, when the body says no, it's going, no, pay attention. But use that hand pressing technique. Please go ahead and use it, and then if you have questions after you've used it, just pop it into the group or send me an email. Did anybody try it there when I was doing it? Anybody want to say how they felt when they did it? Carol and Christine, okay, good. You tried it. So yeah, it can be a really nice leveler.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, you surely can help feel the heat in your hands. My goodness me.
Yeah. So give it a go, and drop me a message and let me know how you're getting on. But if you want to use it 3 times. So just do it once, have a kind of 30 seconds, allow the breath to go back to normal, do it again, do it the 3rd time, and then go into your practice and just see how that feels differently for you. And even then, in case of emergency, break glass type thing, if you're having a bad day, go into the bathroom in the office or wherever you are, sit in the toilet, do the hand pressing technique, and you'll find that it's a very quick way to just reconnect to the body. So, wow. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We're there again. So unless anybody else has got anything else, I think we'll wrap up. Good. Okay. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. And you can turn on your mic and say hello or goodbye if you haven't spoken already. Or just wave. I like those little virtual waves. They're good too.
Thank you very much, Justin and Beatrice.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. And really appreciate you all showing up as well. So it's so brilliant. And we've another call in 7 days. And as I said, the recording will go up as well. Just keep up the good work. Keep sharing how you're getting on. I'll catch up on the emails, and I'll get back on all the responses. So don't worry, your messages are still there, and I'll get back to them. So thanks for keeping up the great work, everyone.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Beatrice. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.